In the last clip, we saw Anand defeating Carlsen in the autumn of 2010 in the Bilbao Grand Slam tournament. They then played twice in a tournament in China and drew both games. And after that, they met. Their next classical encounter was at the London Chess Classic in December 2010, and that's the game we're looking at here. Anand has the white pieces. It's a very tense Spanish position. You can see this typical Spanish pawn structure in the middle of the board, and no pieces have been exchanged. And here Carlsen broke out with d5. Now this is very dangerous for white indeed. I think you can see that, well, if the smoke clears, then Carlsen could be left with this rather fantastic bishop on the long diagonal, whereas Anand's bishop is rather blocked in by the pawn on c3. For example, if Anand exchanges here, well, let's just exchange off lots of pieces and see what happens. So lots of bits are getting chopped here, and you can see that after this Carlsen has the better position, because this is a very poor piece, this is an excellent piece, this rook is poorly placed on a1. All black's pieces are better than white's basically. The queen stands very well in the centre of the board, the bishop can easily come out to d6. So this is the danger for white. Not an easy position for Anand to play at all, so it looks like Carlsen's gaining the initiative. But Anand came up with a very clever idea. Okay, he took on d5, Carlsen took on d4, and now again, if white isn't very switched on, it's easy for black to get a good position. For example, knight takes d4, and, well, for example, queen takes d5, and the rook comes into the middle. You can see that black's pieces are far better placed than white's. Anand exchanged on e8 instead. And now once more, white could just play like this and play queen b3, but black stands better in this position. It's all to do with the poor positioning of the bishop on b2. But Anand thought for some time here and came up with a very clever idea. Objectively, I think white probably is worse here, but he managed to confuse Carlsen. Let's see what happened. Carlsen took on d5, and black is just a pawn up here. And I mean, I was commentating on this game live, and I thought that Anand at least, well, he's given up a pawn, but maybe he's managed to activate his pieces. This bishop looks much better on b2. I thought maybe he would just play the bishop back to f1 to protect the g2 square, and okay, this is the extra pawn, but because so many pieces are on the board, it's going to be very difficult for black to convert this. But of course, black stands better. That was my thinking. But actually, Anand had a far more active continuation in mind. He played knight f5. This is Garry Kasparov's favourite square for the knight. He always said that this was he loved attacking when black had a king on g8. He loved the knight to be on f5. Somehow it looks at lots of dangerous squares in black's position, and that is really the case here. But I mean, when I was looking at this game live, I still wasn't quite convinced about Anand's play, and because he's now given up his dangerous light square bishop as well. But if you feed this position into a computer, then it's possible to find a defense. But Carlsen didn't find a defense. For example, Houdini says here queen e6, and after this move rook c5. Well, I think to humanize, this is an almost impossible defense. You're sort of leaving a bishop on prise, but apparently this is okay for black. But in a practical game, very, very difficult to find, almost impossible. And Carlsen played bishop e4, which looks reasonable to try and chop off pieces. But let's see what happened. Queen d4. Anand had calculated this very well indeed. Carlsen took, and now knight d6. And incredibly, well, white is doing pretty well now. Now, that can't be taken, of course, because of queen takes g7. So let's go back. Instead, queen d8 was played. Now, if the rook is taken, then, well, this is just good for black. 2 pieces for a rook. But instead, knight takes f5. So I think things are becoming a little bit clearer now. There's a threat on g7. There's also a threat to play knight h6 check. Well, that's actually the bigger threat. But also the rook can come to d1, and suddenly black is in massive trouble. Now it's very difficult to compromise here. Carlsen played f6, which is actually a pretty horrible move because it opens up this diagonal towards the king. But it would have been very difficult to play a move like knight f6. Objectively, perhaps this is what black should play, but the problem is defending an ending like this is highly unpleasant with this beautiful knight. There's this horrible bishop, and of course the pawn structure is the real problem here. Black's pawns are shattered. But objectively, this might be the best way for black to play. But I can understand why Carlsen declined to go in for that one. Instead he played f6, but well, he's close to being lost here. With these horrible pins and this open diagonal here. If Carlsen just sits there and tries to protect everything, this is absolutely hopeless. The queen comes in. I mean, basically black can't move here. Can't move the bishop. It's going to be mate on g7. Pin is terrible. Well, if a5, okay, this is a kind of a nothing move. But let's see how white might win here. Bishop a3. So obviously that can't be taken, and now rook e1 followed by rook e8. That'll be the end. So Carlsen played for activity with rook c2, but I mean this is probably just losing now. Actually, this is a forced sequence. Queen g4, check to the king and threatening the knight. Queen came in, and rook takes d7, and black is absolutely on the edge here. I mean, I thought Carlsen was going to be resigning this position in a few moves, actually. But let's see what happened. Queen f8. And now here, Anand could have won by force, but both players were short of time, and I can understand why Anand didn't see this continuation. It's very, very difficult indeed. Now, I'm not showing... Well, let me show you the variation. First of all, rook f7. So this takes the queen away from defending the bishop and the pawn. By the way, if queen g8, then bishop f6 wins. So queen b8. And now white has to be a little bit careful here. Bishop takes f6 is not possible because of rook c1 check, and you can see that queen covers the escape square. So after queen b8, rook e7. Now there's a bit of shuffling back and forth for white. This is, I mean, as I said, very, very difficult to see. I mean, impossible when you're short of time. So the threat is rook e8. So the rook has to come back. Now rook g7. So obviously if this is taken, it leads to mate. So queen takes b2. And that protects the pawn on f6. But now there's a forced win for white, incredibly, with queen f7. I think, you know, if you're short of time, there's no way you're going to go in for something like this. It looks way too risky. I think you'd concentrate on other continuations. But let me show you what happens. Now it looks as though black is just about holding everything together, but incredibly after this move, there's no defence to queen g7. I like the geometry. I like the way white plays rook rook up the board, and then switches across and then back down here, and then allows the queen to come in. Said I'm not showing that to say Anand missed a good continuation, missed a win there. Actually, I think the way Anand played it for time pressure was absolutely the right thing to do. He basically kept control. I think when you're short of time, to attempt to analyse long variations is actually quite foolish. You can easily miss something, miss a tactic. The most important thing is to keep control, and that's exactly what Anand did. And here he's basically arrived at a position where Black has zero counterplay, and Anand appreciated that with the damaged pawns and passive bishop, Black is utterly lost here. Now it took some time to force the win. You can see that Black has zero counterplay, but Anand knew that he was winning it, and actually his technique was perfect. It took over 40 moves to force the win, so I'm going to show you in stages what happened. First of all, he secured the position of his king. So he reached this position after 20 odd moves. He's made sure that his king is perfectly protected. And then his next step was to direct his firepower against the pawn f6, all the while keeping control of the position. So and after another 20 moves, he managed to get this position where he's managed to direct everything against f6. And once that pawn collapses, then it's a very easy win for white indeed. So let's just see how things ended. So now this one is the target. Basically, Black can't defend this position when the 8th rank, the 7th rank are exposed, this diagonal, and there's a weak pawn on h6. It's absolutely impossible. And here, Anand managed to win pawn number 2, and with it, the game. Let's just see how things ended. Queen here attacking f2, and Carlsen had had enough and resigned the game. So there we are. That was Anand's last victory over Carlsen. That was 3 years ago, at the end of 2010. After that, things went Carlsen's way, and in the past year, Carlsen has really shown his superiority over Anand, with crushing victories in Bilbao in 2012 and in their last tournament game, the Tal Memorial, in May 2012. But the match in Chennai, starting in a few days' time, will start at 0-0, and this game perhaps gives a clue as to how Anand should approach the match. I think if Anand can create complications, perhaps early on in the game when he's not too tired and can calculate, and play unorthodox attacking continuations, unorthodox manoeuvres, then that could be the way to disrupt Carlsen's smooth flow of positional chess. But Carlsen comes into this match in fantastic form, and he is clearly the favourite. If Anand manages to win, I think it will be the greatest performance of the Indian's career. But anything can happen. Let's see what happens. The first game is on November the 9th, Saturday, November the 9th. I'll be commentating live on playchess.com. Do join me there. And after each game, I'll be posting reports on YouTube. Do join me.